Agent Morris with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion, over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Flag could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis, and you are tuned in to another edition of the show for the 501c3 nonprofit Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka the Anomaly Archives. I'm your host, Smiles Lewis. It is Anomaly-NOW, straight out of Austin, Texas. This is our not live, pre-recorded recording show for the week of September 18th, Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to getting through tonight's news real briefly here. And thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the good stuff. You can join our free mailing list via patreon.com/Anomaly Archives, where we also have various tiers allowing our patrons access to a variety of materials. And we hope that you'll consider joining us. If you join at the $10 or more level of monthly donations, you get access to our monthly live online lecture series featuring a variety of anomalous, Fortean, paranormal, parapolitical, ufological, uapological speakers. And this month I will be giving a presentation about the Anomaly Archives and its collections and history. And then next month we'll be having Greg Bishop. And then in November we'll probably be having Joe Green talking on parapolitics and conspiracy theory. And then in December we'll be having Twee Snyder talking about the airship UFO wave of times past. And lots of people lining up for monthly presentations in the coming year 2025. So let's jump right in. And you can go to our website, anomalyarchives.com. Excuse me. Well, actually, that might get you there. I forget if we have that or not. You can go to anomalyarchives.org, and we have links to all the news from every show that we've done, Anomaly-NOW. There's links to on the online collections, our OPAC, our online public access catalog of our 7,000 plus books. Actually, not all 7,000 books are currently in that online catalog. We've got a lot of updating to do, but you can also follow the links that we post over at our Flipboard. That's flipboard.com/@Anomaly-Archives. And then there's a series of other URL info that will get you there. There's a ton of news that we will be briefly touching on tonight, today, this morning, this afternoon, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. But that's all over at flipboard.com/@Anomaly-Archives. And as I mentioned, you can go to patreon.com/Anomaly-Archives and see the various tiers that we have for monthly donors, patrons, to help support us in our preservation and public education efforts. If you would like more information on our history, again, go back to anomalyarchives.org. There's a couple of interesting events coming up. This one is not available online, so if you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth, North Texas area, you may want to check this out. It's coming up October 3rd. That's a Thursday, from 12:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. featuring Greg Agigian. Of course, I've been reading Greg's wonderful book, After the Flying Saucers Came, A Global History of the UFO Phenomenon. And that is, of course, going to inform his talk, which is actually called Vanishing Lights, Desert Sages, and Curious Carcasses, How the Southwest Taught the World What to Think About UFOs. And this is being put on by UTA Central Library. And if you go to the events.uta.edu, website, and we'll, of course, put the link in the show notes. There is more about that, including directions and the actual location, which is 702 Planetarium Place, Arlington, Texas. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it up to North Texas. It's a long drive, but boy, I really would like to see Greg in person again. Meanwhile, there is something for you folks up in the Northeast. Up in Chicago, the Chicago Public Library is presenting a lecture series, a conversation with Chicago's leading ufologist. This is on Saturday, October 19th from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Harold Washington Library Center. You can find all the information there, but it's going to feature Mark Roediger, past president and scientific director for the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS, CUFOS, since 1986. Mark is one of the wonderful, rational people in the UFO field. And also, they're going to have Sam Maranto, who has been the state director of Illinois MUFON and a certified field investigator for over 20 years. This one, let's see. Oh, there is a way to watch online. Good. Attend online via YouTube. So if you're not in the Chicago, Illinois area, you will be able to attend this virtually. That's great. I'll have to check into that. And moving right along, over at sentinelnews.substack.com, somebody has translated a French newsletter with some interesting UFO, UAP related information into English from the French. This article was originally published in the French Aeronautics and Astronautics Association's newsletter and is reprinted here with authorization, all rights reserved. It features a variety of authors, and it looks like it's covering material amassed in the year 2023 and published in January of this year, 2024. It says in the second paragraph here, of course, the release of the Pentagon's AERO All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office report on March 6, 2024 is the subject of a short commentary at the beginning of this article, as it provides little new information on current UAP events and superficial comments on past cases and projects, including a few inaccuracies. Oh, just a few. Ultimately, this report affirms the official stance on the ordinariness of these phenomena, though this time it was not published by the ODNI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It contradicts not only the questioning of the astonishing and out-of-the-ordinary characteristics hitherto noted in successive reports since 2020, but also those reported since 2004 by the U.S. Navy, which were exposed by both NASA and AERO in May of 2023. Yeah, so I haven't had the chance to really dive into this, but I'm just glad to see, again, material being preserved and translated into other languages so that people beyond the original source have access to it. That is at sentinelnews.substack.com. Recent news on unidentified aerospace phenomena, collective writing by the 3AF Sigma 2 Technical Committee. Now, our friends over at EFR, expandingfrontiersresearch.org, that is, of course, Erica Lukes and Jack Brewer and others, continued their exposés and chronicling of the very sad state of ufology. Upology, yes. So back, I believe it was in 2020, 4 years ago, Jan Harzan was arrested for soliciting a minor for lewd acts. And this article published 5 days ago by Jack Brewer over at EFR, expandingfrontiersresearch.org. Harzan sentenced to prison. Jan Harzan was sentenced Friday to serve time in state prison stemming from his conviction on charges he solicited sexual activity online from a law enforcement officer he believed to be a 13-year-old girl. He was reportedly arrested when he arrived at a prearranged spot to meet the child. God, this is just so terrible. According to a case summary obtained from Orange County Superior Court of California, Harzan was sentenced to 2 years state prison for a felony count of contacting a minor with the intent to commit a lewd offense. He was also sentenced to 18 months in prison for the felony charge of meeting a minor to commit lewd conduct. It was not immediately clear if the sentences would run concurrently, and then there is a screenshot and link to the information that they received, probably through FOIA, if not just through Public Information Office. Harzan is the former executive director of the MUFON Mutual UFO Network. He's a longtime staple of the organization, which removed him from his position after reports surfaced publicly of his arrest on the charges in 2020. You know, I was just re-listening to our past co-host Mark Jackson's interview with Jan Harzan on behalf of the Paracast, Gene Steinberg's show. And it's a great interview. I should go and put that in the show notes because I really did enjoy re-listening to it. Of course, it's from several years ago before, I think it's 2019, before Harzan's arrest, before the pandemic. And as you know, there's these kinds of people, you kind of hope that you would get a vibe or a sense of something being wrong with them, and it doesn't seem to always be the case. And it is actually a pretty interesting interview. I think Mark Jackson does a great job of questioning Jan Harzan about the state of UFO research at the time. So much has happened since then, but it's still worthwhile going back and listening to that. But it also reminds me how another bigwig in the UFO global community who I had the chance to sit and talk with a couple of years ago, we were talking about his having met Jan Harzan and not having gotten any weird vibes from him, thankfully. But at the same time, one kind of wishes that this perhaps had surfaced earlier so that he wasn't out there committing such acts. But anyway, this is all to say, be careful out there in the UFO field. It is not always a safe place to swim around. Meanwhile, over at medium.com, at Jerry McGowan's blog, which is Osiris UAP, I've been talking about the coverage of Elizondo's new book and his doing the lecture circuit. And Jeremy McGowan is somebody who appeared alongside him and I think went on some road trips with Lou Elizondo, and as we've covered in the past, published some critical reviews, critiques of Lou, and expressed concerns about the nature of the media machine behind him. This article is titled UFO Celebrities, Military Service Records, and the Gray Fox / Task Force Orange. Does it make sense? Now, again, I have not read the book put out by Lou Elizondo. I've been mostly reading other people's critiques of it. And apparently McGowan did the basic research of trying to get some service records for Lou Elizondo to see, does his claimed service make sense? And I will let you take a gander, but I'd say he's without being overly critical, just suspicious. He's exercising suspicion that, from judging by what's publicly available on Lou Elizondo's military history, just doesn't seem to match some of the claims being made about his activities in the military. Of course, as I was just reminded on another show I was listening to, it's important to remember that maybe not everything would be documented in these government records, because apparently a lot of Lou's activities were on the part of third-party military contractors and not the DoD per se. And in fact, I'm really kind of starting to wonder if that's also part of what psychological warfare public information officer Sue Goff is referencing by saying he didn't do what he claims to do as part of the government, but was it part of this third-party contracted effort? Now, of course, it was it's billionaire Bob Bigelow's various organizations that got those contracts. Those are not kind of what I would call military subcontractors or contractors, but it is certainly true that Bob Bigelow's businesses do interface with, as far as I understand, DoD and the military for government military contracts. But and since so much of the OSAP, quote unquote, ATIP programs were operated through Bigelow's organizations, one has to wonder. But this is over at medium.com /@OsirisUAP, Jeremy McGowan's blog, and you can take a gander there. But basically he's expressing his suspicions that something's not adding up here. And I don't know. I'm not really sure what to make of this. Another article from a couple months back by McGowan is also very interesting. If you have an interest in psychic remote viewing and the claims of scientific approaches, parapsychological approaches, and military applications of human psychic ability, this clairvoyance-like, ESP-like anomalous cognition phenomena that is commonly referred to as RFE, or remote viewing. This is a very different take on that, and I certainly, he's exercising extreme suspicion and debunking, in so much as he does not seem to believe that there's any human psychic ability and that it's all a charade on the part of the military-industrial complex as part of an intelligence operation against the Russians. The title is Project Stargate, Unveiling the Hidden Agenda Behind the Facade. He wrote this, or published it, on July 29th, a month or so ago. Following is an op-ed that uses many verifiable data points stitched together with some assumptions. The overarching idea presented below is the author's opinion and may not reflect the actual historical record that time eventually uncovers. Now, this article suffers from repeatedly repeating itself. And it's like it's the old, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, I'm telling you what I'm telling you, and then I tell you what I told you kind of thing, but only even more so. But that's more of a writing critique than the idea. The idea basically seems to be that the whole psychic spying stratagem is a charade, that it is not real, that it's all about convincing people of this special ability on the part of those who've been trained and to affect their behavior, but also the behavior of the target audience, which in this case is the Russians, all as a part of a disinformation ploy and intelligence seeding, mole seeding information kind of operation. Let me see if I can find a good, let's see. Well, this particular paragraph, however, beyond its overt focus on exploring remote viewing psychic phenomena, Project Stargate likely served a dual purpose. It functioned as a lower-level program designed to inject false intelligence into communications that the Soviets would intercept, thus creating strategic disinformation and confusion. Simultaneously, it operated under the auspices of a higher-level program that studied the DIA and CIA's ability to manipulate human behavior. This broader effort aimed to convince individuals that they possessed extraordinary abilities, generating controlled documentation and reports for Soviet interception. Those participating in Project Stargate were likely completely unaware that they were the subjects of a grander experiment. These programs contributed to a broader strategy of disinformation, leveraging the perceived advancements in psychic research to mislead and misdirect Soviet intelligence efforts. Now, this is not a new idea, and I think it is actually very much at the heart of understanding the U.S. intelligence landscape as it relates to UFOs. Obviously, various people I respect and myself have espoused this idea that, well, certainly there is the UFO scene is rife for misinformation, disinformation, harvesting of advanced tech information by foreign powers, and thus also a great way to disinform your enemies, foreign adversaries. But again, I am a firm believer in psychic phenomena, so I'm trying to keep an open mind here and look at what McGowan is suggesting here. But he basically is just straight up like, I don't believe any of this. This is just, it's all a disinformation campaign against the Soviet Union. And maybe it was. I just have a hard time believing that, because I really do believe in psychic phenomena just from the wealth of parapsychological research, my own personal experiences, and the wealth of data, anecdotal though it may be in a lot of cases. There is a lot of good, hard science, in my estimation, for the reality of human psychic ability, but not everybody's going to believe that. Now, on the subject of psychic phenomena, there's some great videos that I'm going to recommend. I love Dean Radin. I think he is a phenomenal parapsychological researcher. Of course, then there are plenty of detractors who say he is completely wrong on a psychic psychic and parapsychological phenomena. This video over at the Demystify Sci podcast, that's Demystify SCI, like science. The podcast is Seeking the Impossible, Magic, CIA Research, and ESP Abilities with Dr. Dean Radin of IONS. He's an investigator of parapsychological phenomena whose career spanned Bell Labs, Stanford Research Institute, etc. Also, we've mentioned several interviews by Jesse Mickles, the American Alchemist podcast, and he's got an interview with Rupert Sheldrake. I am a huge fan of Rupert Sheldrake's, and I have not had the chance to watch this past the opening, but considering how good these interviews with Jesse Mickles tend to be, and how much I highly think of Rupert Sheldrake, I can't wait to watch this. It's titled Meet the Scientist Banned by TED Talks. Yeah, some of you might remember that Rupert Sheldrake gave a TED Talk that some hardcore scientist debunkers petitioned, or however that works, but got it banned from TED Talks. But you could still find it out there. And of course, I can't help but watch the interviews with Lou Elizondo. As much as I might criticize the Good Trouble show with Matt Ford, I did watch his recent interview with Lou Elizondo, or at least parts of it. It's all right. Again, I really don't feel like there's anything new coming out of Lou, so I'm sorry, Lou, but I just don't see that much information coming out, and I just have more and more doubts. On the other hand, I would recommend people watch interviews with Christopher Mellon. Oh, I don't have it here, but the SCU, the Society for Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, is that right? SCU? Anyway, they have a new podcast, which I've mentioned before, called The Anomalous Review. Very much recommend that, especially their interview with Christopher Mellon. All their interviews so far are great, but the one with Christopher Mellon is very good. And this one with Matt Ford at the Good Trouble Show, Dramatic Demand, Congress Called to Action by Pentagon, with Christopher Mellon, is pretty good. Perhaps more interesting is this one, UFO UAP Disclosure, October 18th, Your Right to Know with Daniel Sheehan. This one's put out by Jeffrey Mishlov's New Thinking Aloud. Jeffrey Mishlov is not involved in this interview, but it is a powerful interview. Again, Daniel Sheehan is quite the character, and very much think this interview is worth your time. There's a lot of parapolitical information in there that matches my own ideas and beliefs, what I've researched over the years that you might find interesting. But that one's over at the New Thinking Aloud channel of Jeffrey Mishlov with Danny Sheehan. Moving right along. So there are, of course, these rumors that there is another congressional hearing or hearings planned in the near future on UFOs. Now, this news outlet, bignewsnetwork.com, don't know anything about them, but they reposted this RT.com, Russia Today, U.S. Congress to hold huge UFO hearing article. And, this just, we keep hearing this, that this is quite possible. In fact, in that interview with Daniel Sheehan that we were just mentioning, he is basically saying, October 18th is the big day when so many of the government agencies are supposed to have their information to present to the public on what they've found in their records regarding UFO, UAP government investigations. Will that come to pass? Will that be anything? Is that Big D Disclosure Day? No, I don't think so. But it's still, Daniel Sheehan is still saying this is a very significant date, and we should hold the government accountable, hold their feet to the fire. Not that really happens much in America, it seems like, but it's interesting. Okay, so this Big News Network, who knows, I don't know who owns them, but again, they're reposting a RT.com article, which you may have heard in the news. Meta, aka Facebook, have banned Russia's RT news outlet from their website, their social network, because, of course, our government asserts, and I think it's pretty much an accepted fact, that RT is the mouthpiece of the Soviet Union, Russian government, Putin. In other words, I'm pretty much against all forms of censorship, but there you go. Meanwhile, as far as these news outlets, New York Post has also reported on this idea of a UFO congressional hearings coming about again. That's nypost.com. Truth is out there. Congress to get update on UFOs from Pentagon as Gillibrand presses for data. Weird but true. Of course, New York Post not being the most reputable news outlet, but sometimes the least reputable come out with leads and actual news. Meanwhile, similarly, over at the Daily Mail, bombshell UFO hearings to take place in Congress as new footage emerges of huge craft near U.S. nuclear weapons base. Yeah, so what's going on here? Well, if you go to some site like, say, Google News, you can do a search for UFO hearing. Just in the last 20 hours, you've got The Hill reporting Senate Armed Services Committee to hold UFO hearing. Article by Ellen Mitchell over at The Hill. And, of course, News Nation, no surprise there. They're covering this. And, of course, this is from April of this year. So it's still bubbling up. Will this prove to be real or significant? Hard to say. Doesn't seem like any big mainstream news outlets are carrying any revelation of such UFO congressional hearings being on the agenda anytime soon. Well, let's switch gears here to just a few articles on fringe frontier science over at popularmechanics.com, that bastion of propaganda, scientists might achieve the impossible and actually see gravity. It's the only fundamental force whose carrier has never been directly observed, but that may soon change. This is by Darren Orff from September 13th of this month. And some of the bullet points. The graviton, the hypothetical force carrier for gravity, is the only fundamental force carrier that has yet to be detected. A new study suggests that a proposed graviton detector that uses 4,000-pound aluminum cylinders as acoustic resonators could be used in conjunction with Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, L-I-G-O, to detect single gravitons. Although an ambitious plan, the experiment needs to develop the quantum sensors required to detect energy level changes in the supercooled material, which won't be easy. Not my area of expertise, but fascinating. I know that, we have been able to map gravitational anomalies of the Earth. And in fact, I think in the Flipboard, there's an article about such gravitational anomalies on Mars. So being able to actually see visualizations of them, if that's what they're saying is going to happen or be possible, that's very exciting. Meanwhile, over at sciencealert.com, gigantic wave in Pacific Ocean was the most extreme, quote-unquote, rogue wave on record. In November of 2020, a freak wave came out of the blue, lifting a lonesome buoy off the coast of British Columbia, 17.6 meters, that's 58 feet high. The 4-story wall of water was finally confirmed in February of 2022 as the most extreme rogue wave ever recorded at the time. Such an exceptional event is thought to occur only once every 1,300 years, and unless the buoy had been taken for a ride, we might never have known it even happened. For centuries, rogue waves were considered nothing but nautical folklore. It wasn't until 1995 that myth became fact. On the first day of the new year, a nearly 26-meter-high wave, 85 feet, suddenly struck an oil drilling platform roughly 100 miles off the coast of Norway. At the time, the so-called Dropnar wave defied all previous model scientists had put together. So I may be incorrect, but they talk about how it's thought that, yes, some ships that went missing in the 1970s, for instance, are now thought to have been sunk by sudden looming waves. The leftover floating wreckage looks like the work of an immense whitecap. I'm not sure if they're referring to this idea, but I believe rogue waves may have been one of the hypotheses associated with the idea of what has caused boats to disappear in the Bermuda Triangle, though I think there's also this idea of, I think, methane bubbles or some other kind of bubble. But would that also affect aircraft? Not the rogue waves, I don't think. You'd have to be flying pretty low, I guess, but the boats possibly. I'm not sure if that's what they're referring to about boats from the 1970s, but that's immediately what came to mind. And let's see, we've got a series of articles linked in the Flipboard about this interesting case. I think it was Victor. I think Victor turned me on to this over at theconversation.com. The skyscraper-sized tsunami that vibrated through the entire planet and no one saw. So I remember some news blips about this, but it's interesting to see how a cavalcade of various scientists all working together were able to figure out this mystery. The article says over at theconversation.com, earthquake scientists detected an unusual signal on monitoring stations used to detect seismic activity during September 2023. We saw it on sensors everywhere from the Arctic to Antarctica. We were baffled. The signal was unlike any previously recorded. Instead of the frequency-rich rumble typical of earthquakes, this was a monotonous hum containing only a single vibration frequency. Even more puzzling was that the signal kept going for 9 days. Initially classified as a USO, an unidentified seismic object, the source of the signal was eventually traced back to a massive landslide in Greenland's remote Dixon Fjord. A staggering volume of rock and ice, enough to fill 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, plunged into the fjord, triggering a 200-meter-high mega tsunami and a phenomenon known as a seep, a wave in the icy fjord that continued to slosh back and forth some 10,000 times over 9 days. To put the tsunami in context, that 200-meter wave was double the height of the tower that houses Big Ben in London and many times higher than anything recorded after massive undersea earthquakes in Indonesia in 2004. or Japan in 2011. It was perhaps the tallest wave anywhere on Earth since 1980. And there's a graphic here that shows what amount of land broke off or landslide initiated this tsunami. The article continues by saying, our discovery, now published in the journal Science, relied on collaboration with 66 other scientists from 40 institutions across 15 countries. Woo! Much like an air crash investigation, solving this mystery required putting many diverse pieces of evidence together, from a treasure trove of seismic data to satellite imagery in fjord water level monitors and detailed simulations of how the tsunami wave evolved. There's a lot more to this article, and we also have links to the actual science.org paper, a rockslide generated tsunami in a Greenland fjord rang Earth for 9 days, over at science.org. And then lastly, over at sciencealert.com, this is wild stuff. These creatures occupy, quote unquote, third state beyond life and death, scientists say. Life and death are traditionally viewed as opposites, but the emergence of new multicellular life forms from the cells of a dead organism introduces a, quote, third state that lies beyond the traditional boundaries of life and death. Usually, scientists consider death to be the irreversible halt of functioning of an organism as a whole. However, practices such as organ donation highlight how organs, tissues, and cells can continue to function even after an organism's demise. So, I had seen another article about this, and I just didn't get around to reading it. And I still, this is, again, I'm really outside my range of knowledge, but sounds intriguing, don't you think? Well, that is going to be it for today's show. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you tuning in or listening to the rebroadcast or subscribing to the podcast. Again, hit the like, thumbs up for the show. Please hit the notification bell, subscribe to the YouTube feed. All those things are very helpful, and we really appreciate it. And, well, I guess that'll be it. So, good night, good day, good morning, hallelujah. Mm-hmm.